So today I'm going to be showing you why you would want worms, and why I wanted worms and why you wanted worms might be two different things. So we're going to try to go over all of them today and get everybody on the same page. So when I was like 8 or 10, I went to a friend's house and they had worms in a boat, like just filled up in a boat that didn't float. And we're walking by it, and he's like, "Hey, look at this!" And he pulls out a handful of worms, and I'm like, "Whoa, dude, where the heck did you get them?" And anyway, they had found them, threw them in there. Now they had a whole boat full of worms, and that's what they went fishing with. Now, did they use it in the garden? I was too young to ask. So, anyway, how I found out about worms was kind of through that, and then it took me fishing for probably 5 years until I was like, okay, hold up. But I started with the Canadian Nightcrawler fishing cups that you get at the store, the big box stores, and I would go fishing, and by the time I got back from the fishing trip, it wouldn't even be halfway over, and my fishing worms were no longer with us. So they kind of died from the heat because they're from Canada and they're used to going down way, way low in the temperatures, and then you bring them to the hot south where it can get 100 degrees in the summertime when most people fish, and your worms ain't gonna make it. So that kind of led me into the path of, hey, why don't I try to raise them? So did some YouTubing, got me some little plastic totes and drilled some holes in it, and here I am thinking I got a worm bin. Buy those Canadian night crawlers I told you about from the store, not knowing what I was doing. Put those in, and I gave them some old moldy almonds, and it didn't work out at all. I don't even think they made it a day, just because, again, that temperature difference messed them up. So, you have to do your research on any live animal. I would recommend, no matter how important you think the animal is, they do have certain stuff that you have to follow to raise them right. But once we got into the worms, it was really because of gardening. We had tried everything in gardening for like 2 years, and I was like, well, what's the best dirt? And then I went to looking, and it said worm castings were the best dirt for your garden organically. So that's how we ended up with the cheap worms. So, and then the cheap worms didn't work out, so then we bought the more expensive worms, and everything's going great, as you can see. And now we are selling the expensive worm because it is just a better worm. They reproduce faster, they eat the food faster, they look better, and they're not flighty. So for organic gardening, in my experience, there's nothing like producing your own soil. And you can do it through compost, and composting's great if your outlook on gardening is like 2 to 3 years. But if you're trying to garden this year, now's kind of the time to get the worms to have the castings ready to go in the garden in the springtime or whenever your zone specifies it. But we'll be getting into more detail in the gardening once it warms up, and we will be kind of a gardening worm channel, but main focus will always be the worms. But I feel there's not enough out there on the worms with gardening, so I'm going to try to be that for you guys. And so another reason why you would want worms besides gardening, and by the way, on gardening, it's probably the best tasting food you've ever ate, and you'll be healthier, and it'll probably change your life, just because you've never had good food unless you've grew them yourself, the way I tell you. So anyway, another reason why you would want worms besides gardening is fishing, like I kind of got into. And people fish with plastic lures, and if you've ever went fishing, you've hung a lure in a tree, or you've sunk it to the bottom of a creek, or a fish has ripped it. So if you're a fish and you're throwing, you see a lure coming, you're going to grab it, and you're going to get your rip lipped, and you could lose that lure. But if it's a worm that you threw out there and you lose the worm, maybe the fish got the worm, maybe he got a little nutrition, he's got to heal that lip, and you didn't get your lure stuck in a tree or nothing like that. So in my opinion, after fishing for many years, the worm is probably the best bait. So that's what I would say why you'd want worms. And also for recycling food waste, you don't realize how much food you're throwing away until you have worms, and you're like, wow, all these banana peels and stuff I was just throwing in the trash, where I could have had a resource to grow good vegetables. Or if you're not into gardening, I would advise you to, just because it's a good time, but also just to keep the stuff out of the landfill. And if you don't like gardening, maybe your wife likes flowers, or someone and if they don't like flowers or vegetables, they probably like pretty grass. So, I would recommend, if you want pretty grass, a light dusting of castings. And you can also grow your own worms for your reptiles. A lot of reptiles eat worms, and if you got the red wiggler 100%, then you could easily feed your worms. Feed your reptiles in a sustainable way. And probably with only a pound of worms, if that was all you were doing with it. But depends on the reptile and a whole bunch of other stuff. And you guys stuck through me with the story. You made it almost to the end. Absolute legends for still being here. And I cannot wait for the springtime to show you some of our tomatoes and pepper plants we're going to grow. But we are going to show soon, we're going to start some of our early season crops that go in this month. So we will be dropping some of those videos. And don't forget to check out harleysworms.com, where we sell you the worms and the castings and the microbial mix to boost your worm bin. And not only that, the microbial mix works great in a potting mix that we will be going into also. And here's a fun fact for you. If you are going to grow tomatoes and peppers, now is the time to get you some bamboo. Not that I'm recommending you to buy bamboo. You need to do your own research on that one, because it is invasive if it's not taken care of properly. But that's what I'm going to be getting to trellis my tomatoes and peppers, along with some other stuff. So now's the time to be doing your research on gardening, and not wait until April and May to figure out how you're going to get your mix.